Lyria, the alien princess, lived on a large interstellar station where many species came and went every single day. The station was always full of voices, footsteps, and bright lights from shops, learning centers, and travel docks. People from different planets walked confidently through the long glass hallways, talking to their families or carrying boxes filled with supplies. To most people, this place felt exciting and alive. But for Lyria, it felt like a world she watched from behind an invisible wall. She often sat in the same quiet corner near the observation deck, where one could see the stars floating like tiny lamps outside the large window. She chose that place because it was peaceful and because no one bothered her there. People respected her position and her background, but that respect often turned into distance. Some stepped aside when she walked, some lowered their gaze, and some whispered about her traditions and her royal duties. None of them meant harm, but they did not know how to treat her like an ordinary person. They did not realize how lonely she felt behind their careful politeness. Lyria had grown up with strict customs. Her people believed royalty must remain calm, controlled, and silent unless necessary. Smile too much, and someone might think you were careless. Speak too freely, and someone might think you lacked discipline. Over the years, these rules became like heavy ropes that held her back from expressing herself. She longed to be like the others she saw passing by, laughing with friends, sharing stories, arguing, joking, simply being themselves without worrying about how their actions reflected on their ancestors or their planet. She remembered moments from her childhood when she would sneak away from her lessons to look at the sky, wondering who lived among the stars. Back then, she believed that somewhere, someone would understand her without needing to know her title. But as she grew older, reality taught her that people feared making mistakes around royalty. They always tried to act perfect, so perfect that they forgot to act human. Now, whenever she sat near the observation deck, she remained silent, her hands neatly placed on her lap. She watched everyone, hoping someone would look her way without nervousness in their eyes. Sometimes a child would stare at her colorful skin patterns or her glowing eyes, curious instead of scared. But their parents quickly pulled them away, whispering that it was not polite to stare at a princess. Every time that happened, Lyria's heart sank a little. She did not want to be distant. She wanted to be approachable. She wanted someone to sit beside her without thinking twice. The workers on the station knew she liked this quiet area. They greeted her from far away with a respectful nod before continuing their work. They were kind people, yet they never treated her like a friend. She sometimes wondered if that was her fate to be surrounded by people, yet alone inside. One afternoon, as the artificial lights dimmed to mimic evening, Lyria looked at the small group of travelers who had stopped to rest near the deck. They were laughing loudly, sharing snacks, teasing each other in friendly ways. She watched them carefully, noticing how relaxed and happy they seemed. She wished she could join them, but she knew she would only make them uncomfortable. Royalty did not join casual gatherings. That was what she had been taught since childhood. But deep inside, she wanted to break that rule. The station air was cool, moving softly as the ventilation systems hummed in the background. Lyria wrapped her long scarf around herself, not because she felt cold, but because the scarf made her feel safe. It had been a gift from her mother, woven from soft threads that shimmering gently in the light. Her mother had told her it would remind her that she was loved, even when alone. Lyria touched the fabric gently, feeling a little comfort from the familiar texture. Her days often looked the same. She would attend meetings with diplomats, listen to discussions about trade or peace treaties, and then return to this quiet corner to rest. The work she did was important, but it left her emotionally drained. She hoped that maybe, someday, she would meet someone who would not see her only as a representative of her people, but as a person with her own dreams and worries. The stars outside the window glowed softly, creating patterns only her species could understand. Her people often read stories in the stars, believing that each glowing dot carried a memory of the universe. Lyria traced shapes in the sky using her eyes, making up new stories to comfort herself. She imagined heroes who traveled alone until they found someone who understood them. She imagined journeyers who were brave enough to reach out to others without thinking about status or rules. She imagined these things because they made her feel less alone. As time passed, more people came and went. Occasionally someone would look at her, surprised to see a princess sitting alone in such a simple place. They expected her to stay in royal chambers or private lounges, not on an open observation deck. But Lyria preferred this place because she could watch real life happen around her. She saw families reunite after long trips, merchants negotiating prices, researchers excitedly discussing their discoveries, and travelers carrying stories of faraway worlds. It made her feel connected. Even if she wasn't part of those moments, one of her guards stood at a distance, keeping watch without approaching. They had been trained to give her space while ensuring her safety. But even the presence of guards reminded her of the barrier between her and others. She sometimes wished she could ask them to leave completely, but she knew it would only create concern and more rules. She straightened her posture and took a deep breath, hoping to ease the heaviness in her chest. She told herself she would not lose hope. Maybe someone, someday, would look past the title and see her heart. Maybe someone would sit beside her without hesitation, without fear, without worrying about what others thought. Her fingers tapped lightly on her knee, a small habit she had developed whenever she felt anxious. Her people considered such gestures improper, but she allowed herself this one small freedom when she was alone. It helped her stay calm. The station broadcast played gentle music in the background, a soft melody that blended with the hum of engines. Lyria closed her eyes for a moment, listening carefully. Music always soothed her. She imagined herself not as a princess, but as an ordinary traveler resting after a long journey. When she opened her eyes again, she saw groups of humans, reptilian beings, mechanical life forms, and winged species passing by. So many different shapes, colors, voices, yet she remained separate from all of them. She questioned whether solitude was her destiny or simply a temporary chapter of her life. She preferred to believe it was temporary. Every day, she hoped for something unexpected, something that would break the silence of her routine. She didn't know what form it would take or who it would involve. She only knew that she longed for a moment that would make her feel seen not as royalty, but as Lyria, a person who simply wished for company. She shifted slightly on the long bench, staring once more at the stars. The station lights dimmed further, signaling the approach of night cycle. She wondered what tomorrow would bring. She wondered if someone would finally dare to sit near her. Even if just for a moment, she did not know it yet, but her life was about to change. Someone would soon enter this quiet corner of hers, someone who would not pause, hesitate, or overthink. Someone who would simply sit down next to her as if she were not a princess, but just another being in need of a friend. Someone who would see her not her title, not her duties, not her traditions, but her heart. That moment had not arrived yet, but the universe was already guiding it toward her one step at a time. Evan arrived at the interstellar station on a calm afternoon, carrying a small backpack over his shoulder and holding a data tablet in his hand. He was a human researcher who had spent the last few years traveling from one planet to another, studying different cultures and learning about species he had never met before. Unlike many travelers, Evan was not afraid of new places. In fact, new places made him feel alive. Every culture, every language, every tradition fascinated him. He felt excitement, not fear, when he faced something unknown. The moment he stepped into the main hall of the station, he looked around with wide eyes, taking in everything. He noticed the tall glass walls, the glowing pathways, and the floating screens displaying star routes. He saw groups of different species walking together, carrying tools, books, or food containers. The air was full of gentle humming from energy systems and soft music from nearby shops. Evan loved this kind of environment. It made him feel like he was standing at the center of the universe, surrounded by countless stories waiting to be discovered. He slowly walked through the crowd, studying the details of each face he saw. Some beings had wings, some had scales, and some had mechanical parts shining under the lights. Evan smiled at each of them. Even if they didn't smile back, he enjoyed trying to understand them. He had come to the station to take part in a cultural exchange program. His job was simple: observe, learn, and share knowledge between species. Humans were still new to intergalactic communities, so researchers like Evan played an important role. While others worried about dangers, language barriers, or differences, Evan felt that differences were the most beautiful part. They made life interesting. As he walked further into the station, he noticed how most people kept their distance from certain areas. They avoided one particular corner of the observation deck. Evan found that strange, because it looked like the most peaceful place in the hall. The huge window overlooked the stars directly, and the long bench beneath it looked comfortable. Why would people avoid it? Curiosity pushed him to take a closer look. He stepped toward the quiet corner, moving slowly so he could observe without disturbing anyone. And then he saw her. Lyria. The alien princess sat with her hands resting gently on her lap, her scarf glowing softly under the artificial lights. Her skin patterns shimmered like distant galaxies, and her eyes reflected the stars outside the window. She sat gracefully, but there was a deep, quiet sadness in her expression, something only a person with a careful heart could notice. Evan had seen many species during his travels, but he had never met someone like her. She looked peaceful, yet lonely, royal, yet fragile. The moment he saw her, he understood why people kept their distance. They were intimidated by her presence, afraid to disrespect her or break some unknown rule. But Evan did not feel the same fear. He had learned long ago that titles and appearances often hid the real emotions inside a person. He watched her for a few seconds. She did not look at the crowd. Instead, she looked at the stars as if she wished she could escape into them. Something about her posture quietly whispered, "I am alone," even though she was surrounded by life. Evan took a breath. He could either walk away like everyone else, or he could do what his heart naturally told him to do. He walked forward. He moved with calm steps, not rushing, not hesitating. He didn't think about rules or traditions. He simply thought about the person sitting alone in front of him. When he reached the bench, he sat beside her naturally, gently, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Lyria turned her head slightly, surprised. No one ever approached her like that. She expected people to stop several steps away, bow, or ask permission before coming closer. But this human did none of that. He simply sat down comfortably, without fear. Evan smiled a little, not speaking yet. He didn't want to startle her. He just wanted her to know she wasn't alone. Lyria blinked slowly, unsure how to respond. She studied the human next to her. His brown eyes were warm, not fearful. His posture was relaxed, not tense. He didn't look like he was trying to impress her or avoid her. He simply existed beside her, sharing the quiet space. Finally, Lyria spoke softly. "You are not afraid." Oh, it wasn't a question. It was an observation. Evan looked toward the stars and said, "Why should I be?" She didn't answer right away. She wasn't used to people speaking so casually in her presence. Most talked with stiff voices, choosing each word carefully. But his tone was light and natural. It felt refreshing after a moment. She asked gently, "Do you know who I am?" Evan turned his head and looked at her properly for the first time. "Yes," he said honestly. "But I also see someone who looks like she could use company." Lyria's chest tightened. No one had said something like that to her before. People always talked to her about duties, responsibilities, or royal matters, not about her feelings, Evan continued. "I'm Evan. I just arrived today. I travel a lot, so I like exploring new places." His introduction was simple, but sincere. Lyria found herself relaxing slightly. She looked at his backpack, worn from travel. She saw the small patches stitched onto the fabric symbols from different planets he had visited. Each one told a story, and from the look in his eyes, she guessed he had many more stories in his heart. She quietly asked, "You explore alone?" Evan nodded. "Most of the time, yes. But I meet new people everywhere I go. It's the best part." Lyria looked down at her hands. She wondered what it must feel like to move freely, to sit with strangers, to laugh openly. She wondered what it must be like to be treated as an ordinary traveler, instead of royalty. Evan noticed her silence and gently leaned back against the bench. "Do you like watching the stars?" he asked softly. She nodded. "Me too," he said, smiling a little. "They make everything feel bigger and smaller at the same time. Bigger, because the universe is endless. Smaller, because our worries seem tiny when we look at them. Lyria felt warmth spread through her chest. His words were simple, yet they touched her heart. Evan did not speak like a diplomat. He did not use fancy language. He spoke like a friend. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she had to choose her words carefully. She didn't feel like she had to hide her true self. She felt a sense of ease she had forgotten existed. People walking by noticed the unusual sight. A human sitting beside the princess, talking calmly. Some slowed down, surprised. Some whispered, but Evan and Lyria ignored them. They continued talking slowly, naturally, as if they had known each other longer than a few minutes. Lyria finally asked something she had always wondered but never asked anyone else before. Why did you come here? To this quiet spot? Evan shrugged lightly. It looked peaceful. And you looked like someone who might want someone to sit with her. Lyria lowered her eyes, touched by his honesty. No one had ever said such a simple, yet meaningful thing to her. She had always believed no one noticed her loneliness. But this human had seen it instantly. The station lights shifted again, marking the time. But neither of them moved. The quiet between them felt gentle, not heavy. Evan didn't fill every silence with words, and Lyria appreciated that. Sometimes silence felt like friendship too, the longer they sat together. The more she realized something important. Evan had not approached her because she was a princess. He had approached her because she was alone. That simple act of kindness began to melt the walls she had built around her heart. When Evan finally stood up to explore more of the station, he smiled at her again. I'll probably come here again later. I hope I'll see you here. Lyria felt something she had not felt in a long, long time. Hope. Soft, warm, comforting hope. After he left, she looked at the stars again. But this time, the stars did not feel as distant. Something had changed inside her. Someone had sat beside her without hesitation. And that small moment was the beginning of something she had been waiting for all her life. Lyria found herself returning to the observation deck earlier than usual the next day. She tried to tell herself that she simply wanted to enjoy the quiet evening lights of the station, the calm hum of the engines, and the peaceful view of stars scattered across the galaxy. But deep inside, she knew the truth. She hoped the human named Evan would return. She sat in her usual place. But her posture was slightly different. Less stiff. Less careful. She looked around more often, listening to the footsteps and voices passing behind her. At every sound, she wondered if it might be him. It had been a long time since she had looked forward to meeting someone. The feeling felt new and unfamiliar, but also warm and comforting. Minutes passed, then more. Lyria tried not to look disappointed. She wrapped her scarf around her shoulders and gazed at the stars to calm herself. He said he might come, she whispered in her thoughts, but he never promised. She reminded herself that she had no right to expect anything. Evan was a traveler. He probably had many places to explore. Still, her heart hoped. And then she heard footsteps. Relaxed, unhurried. She recognized the rhythm immediately. Evan walked differently from others. He didn't rush like diplomats, didn't march like soldiers, didn't shuffle like tired workers. His steps always sounded curious, as if he were eager to see the world. She turned her head slowly, trying not to appear too eager. Evan stood there, smiling lightly. I hoped you'd be here. For a moment, Lyria forgot how to breathe, but she recovered quickly and nodded. I usually come here at this time. That makes it easier for me, Evan said as he walked over and sat beside her again without hesitation, just like before. His presence filled the quiet corner with gentle warmth. Lyria felt calmer immediately. She had never realized how comforting it was to have someone sit beside her without fear. It made the space feel less empty and her heart less heavy. They sat in silence for a moment, both of them watching the soft glow of the stars outside the window. The lights of distant ships passed by slowly, like drifting fireflies. The silence between them was gentle, not uncomfortable. Eventually, Evan turned his head slightly toward her. I hope I didn't disturb you. You didn't, she replied softly. Was waiting. She didn't realize how honest her words were until they left her mouth. Her eyes widened slightly in surprise, but Evan only smiled, touched by her sincerity. "I'm glad," he said quietly. Lyria felt something warm bloom inside her chest. She had grown used to hiding her emotions, but with Evan, she didn't feel the need to pretend. After a moment, Evan laughed softly, looking around. "This place is beautiful, but I think it looks even more peaceful when you're here." Lyria blinked, unsure how to respond. No one had spoken to her like that before. Compliments were usually formal, shallow, or politely rehearsed. But Evan's words were simple and genuine. "You speak differently than others," she said gently. He tilted his head. "Is that good?" "It feels honest," she replied. Evan laughed lightly. "That's because I don't know how to talk in the royal way. I just talk like myself." That, Lyria paused, searching for the right words. "That is what I like." Their eyes met for a moment, and Evan felt something shift, a soft connection beginning to form. He could see that behind Lyria's calm face, there was a longing to be understood, and he respected that deeply. He leaned back against the bench and asked, "So, Princess Lyria, what is your life really like? I mean, when you're not here watching the stars?" Lyria looked down at her hands, thinking. "My life is filled with duties," she said softly. "Meetings, decisions, diplomacy, traditions that have existed longer than I have." "Do you enjoy it?" Evan asked carefully. She didn't answer right away. Her silence itself was an answer. After a few seconds, she spoke. "I do what is expected of me. Joy is not something I think about often." Evan's heart softened. He had met many leaders during his travels, but none who spoke so honestly about loneliness. Most hid behind authority. But Lyria allowed him to see the quiet truth inside her. "Doesn't anyone treat you like just Lyria?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "No, they see the princess, not the person." Evan frowned thoughtfully. "I see Lyria." She turned toward him, surprised. His words were so simple, yet they carried something powerful. For years she had lived with the belief that no one could see past her title. But this human did effortlessly, naturally. "How?" she whispered. "Because you look like someone who wants to talk," he said. "Someone who wants a friend?" A fragile breath escaped her. It had been so long since someone had used the word friend around her. That simple word felt like sunlight on a cold day. Lyria hesitated, then asked, "Is that what you are trying to be?" "My friend." Evan shrugged softly. "If you want me to be," her eyes softened, and she nodded. "Yes, I would like that." A warm silence settled over them, filled with a quiet happiness. To lighten the mood, Evan lifted his backpack and opened it. "I brought something," he said. "A small gift from Earth." Lyria looked curious. She had never received an informal gift before. Evan pulled out a small, folded paper star. It was simple, delicate, and handmade. "It's called an origami star," he explained. "Humans make these for people they care about or want to encourage." Lyria took it carefully, holding it between her fingers as if it were something precious. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "I thought you'd like it," he said, smiling. She did like it more than she expected. The small paper star felt warm because it came from someone who saw her as a person, not a symbol. Lyria looked up at him again. "You are not afraid of me," she said, repeating her words from yesterday. "And you are not afraid of me." Evan replied gently. She held the paper star close to her scarf and lowered her gaze. Touched deeply, a few people in the crowd began to whisper again. Surprised to see the princess speaking so freely with a human? But this time, Lyria didn't care. For once, she didn't worry about how people saw her. Evan leaned forward slightly, studying her expression. "Can I ask something else?" "You may," she replied. "What do you want?" "More than anything?" The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her what she wanted. They always asked what her planet needed, what the alliance required, or what the traditions demanded. But what she wanted? That was a question she had never been given permission to answer. She took a slow breath. "I want to be seen," she said finally. "Not as royalty, but as myself. I want to speak freely. I want someone to listen without judging me or fearing me. She looked down at the paper star again. "I want moments like this, Evan felt something warm spread through him. He nodded slowly. Then I hope we have many more moments like this. Lyria smiled softly, almost shyly. It was the first genuine smile she had allowed herself in a long time. They continued talking. And the more they talked, the more they discovered how easily their thoughts connected. Evan told her about Earth, about oceans, mountains, cities filled with stories. Lyria shared small pieces of her culture, stories that made her eyes glow brighter. Every moment felt natural, effortless. The conversations that should never have happened between a princess and an ordinary traveler were now becoming the most precious part of her days. They talked until the lights dimmed for night cycle. Even then, neither wanted to leave. By the time they finally stood up, something had already begun growing between them. Something gentle, honest, and rare. A connection, a friendship, a bond that neither of them had expected, but both quietly needed. Days passed, and the quiet corner of the observation deck slowly changed from a lonely place to a warm and meaningful part of Lyria's life. Before meeting Evan, she had always come here to be alone, to escape the heavy pressure of her duties. But now, whenever she sat on the long bench, she felt a soft excitement inside her chest. She no longer sat in silence, waiting for the stars to comfort her. She waited for Evan's footsteps, and almost every day came. Sometimes he arrived with a cheerful smile, carrying a small snack he found at one of the stalls. Sometimes he came tired after a long exploration, but he still sat beside her without fail. And sometimes he came quietly, just to keep her company when she didn't feel like talking. No matter how he arrived, his presence always made her heart lighter. The station workers began noticing the change in the princess. Her eyes no longer looked distant. Her posture seemed softer, more relaxed. She even laughed out a polite smile, but a real laugh that softened the glow in her eyes. People were surprised at first, unsure how to react. Some whispered about the unusual friendship, but their whispers could not change the simple truth. Lyria was happier. Evan often told her stories about Earth. He described blue oceans that looked endless, green forests filled with life, and mountains that touched the clouds. To Lyria, these stories sounded like dreams. She imagined waves rolling over sandy shores, birds flying between tall trees, and cold winds brushing across snowy peaks. She loved how Evan spoke not like a teacher giving a lesson, but like someone sharing a memory he treasured. In return, Lyria told Evan about her homeworld. She explained how her people used glowing stones to light their cities, how their gardens floated in the air, and how children learned to read the patterns in the stars. Evan listened with shining eyes, amazed by every detail she shared. He would ask questions, not out of politeness, but because he truly wanted to understand her world. Their conversations became like a bridge between two distant cultures. But more importantly, they became a bridge between their hearts. One evening, when the station lights dimmed into a soft purple shade, Evan noticed something special. Lyria's hands, usually calm and still, moved gently as she talked, expressing emotions she had always hidden. She leaned slightly closer when she wanted to share something important. Her voice softened whenever she told a personal story. Evan could tell she was finally letting herself be open. "You seem different lately," Evan said gently, watching the glow reflected on her face. Lyria paused and looked at him with curious eyes. "Different how?" "Happier," he said simply. She lowered her gaze, touched by his words. "I feel lighter," she admitted, "as if the air around me is less heavy." "I didn't know I could feel this way," Evan smiled softly. "You deserve to feel this way." Lyria felt warmth spread through her. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not with such kindness, not with such sincerity. She looked at him, wondering how a single human could bring so much peace into her life. As more days passed, they developed small habits without realizing it. Evan would bring a new object from one of the shops, sometimes a small charm, sometimes a colorful fruit, sometimes a handmade item crafted by another species. Lyria would study each gift carefully, fascinated by the stories behind them. In return, Lyria shared small pieces of her culture. One day she brought a tiny crystal from her planet. It glowed softly when held gently, as if responding to emotions. She placed it in Evan's hand. The crystal lit up with a warm gold color. "What does that mean?" Evan asked, surprised. "It reacts to calm hearts," she explained softly. "It shows when someone has peaceful thoughts." Evan stared at the warm glow in his palm. "So it likes me?" Lyria allowed herself a small laugh. "It recognizes your sincerity." The sound of her laugh made Evan smile wider. He loved hearing that gentle sound full of softness and promise. Lyria had changed, and everyone could see it. The guards who once stood stiffly now saw her talking freely, gesturing animatedly and smiling at the small stories Evan shared. Station workers whispered to each other, surprised by how bright the princess looked these days. Even some visiting diplomats noticed that she appeared more open in meetings, more confident, more alive. But Lyria didn't care about the whispers. What mattered to her was the person who sat beside her at the observation. The one who reminded her she was not alone. One evening, as they watched the stars drift slowly outside, Evan spoke softly. "Do you know what I like about you the most?" Lyria blinked, taken aback. "What?" "The way your silence feels peaceful, not distant," he said. "You don't need to talk all the time. Being around you feels calm." Like everything slows down, Lyria stared at him, surprised by the depth of his words. Many people found her silence uncomfortable, but Evan saw it as something beautiful. That simple difference meant more to her than he could imagine. She looked toward the stars, her heart stirring softly. "No one has ever said that to me." "Maybe they didn't understand," Evan replied gently. "But I do." Lyria's throat tightened. She wasn't used to feeling emotional, but with Evan, her emotions no longer scared her. They felt natural, like something she had been holding inside for far too long. Later that same evening, she spoke honestly. "Evan, since meeting you, I feel like the world around me has color again. Before, everything felt heavy, quiet, empty. But now, when I come here, I feel welcomed." Evan listened carefully, touched by her words. "That means a lot to me," he said. "And I'm glad you feel that way. I'm glad I can be here with you." Their friendship grew stronger each day. They discovered they enjoyed similar things like quiet moments, gentle conversations, stories of faraway places, and simply watching the stars. Evan's presence softened the loneliness Lyria had carried for years. And Lyria's kindness made Evan feel something he hadn't felt during his travels, a sense of belonging. But the biggest change happened inside Lyria herself. One day, she arrived at the observation deck earlier than usual. She sat down and waited patiently, her fingers lightly touching the paper star Evan had given her. She held it softly, the way one holds something cherished. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, not as a princess, not as a symbol of responsibility, but as herself. She realized something important. Evan's small act of sitting beside her had changed everything. It had given her courage. Courage to speak freely. Courage to laugh. Courage to show her feelings. Courage to let someone into her life. As she waited for Evan's arrival, she looked at her reflection in the glass. She saw a princess who no longer looked lonely. She saw a person who was beginning to shine from the inside. Evan finally arrived, carrying a newly purchased drink from a stall. "I thought you might like this," he said. "It's a fruit tea from a distant planet. The vendor said it tastes like starlight." Lyria took the drink carefully. "What does starlight taste like?" "Try it," Evan said with a grin. She sipped it slowly. A sweet, cool flavor spread across her tongue, making her smile softly. "It tastes hopeful." Evan laughed. "Then it suits you." They shared another long conversation that evening, filled with warm laughter, gentle pauses, and stories from their worlds. Every word felt deep. Every silence felt meaningful. As the night cycle approached, Lyria looked at Evan and realized something she had not understood before. She was no longer just happier. She was changing. She had always lived behind walls built from tradition and caution. But little by little, those walls were falling. And the person helping her break them was sitting right next to her, smiling at her as if she were simply Lyria. not a princess. Her heart felt warm and full. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alive. The days on the interstellar station slowly passed, but for Lyria and Evan, each day felt new and full of meaning. What began as a simple moment, a human sitting beside an alien princess who had always been alone, had now turned into a bond that everyone around them could see. People from different planets noticed the gentle way they spoke to each other, the comfortable silence they shared, and the small smiles that appeared on their faces whenever they met. Lyria, who once walked through the station quietly and carefully, now walked with a lighter step. Her eyes, once filled with loneliness, now sparkled with life. She had always carried the weight of her royal responsibilities, and she always stood apart from others because of those expectations. But with Evan, she felt like she could simply be herself, without pretending or hiding her true emotions. One morning, while they sat together near a large observation window, watching the planets move slowly in the distance, Lyria said something that surprised Evan deeply. "You have changed me," she said softly, looking at the stars. "Before you came here, I felt like I was fading into the background. I was present, but I wasn't alive." Evan turned toward her. "I didn't do anything special," he replied. "I just sat beside someone who needed a friend." Lyria shook her head. "No, Evan. You gave me something I never had before. You treated me like a person, not a princess. Not someone who must be perfect all the time. You spoke to me with honesty, and you listened to me. That is far more powerful than you think." He didn't know what to say. Her words were simple, but carried deep meaning. He realized that sometimes small acts of kindness could make huge changes in someone's life. A few days later, Lyria received a message from her homeworld. Her family, including her mother, the queen, wanted to meet Evan. At first, Evan was nervous. Meeting the royal family of an alien species was not something he ever imagined happening. But Lyria reassured him. "They will like you," she said. "They will see what I see. Are you sure?" He asked with a small smile. "I am," she replied with confidence. When they finally arrived on Lyria's home planet, Evan was amazed. The planet was peaceful, colorful, and full of gentle light. Tall structures made of shining crystal rose into the sky, and soft blue rivers ran through the land. Everything looked calm and welcoming. Lyria's family waited for them in a beautiful hall, made of transparent stone that reflected the sunlight like tiny stars. The queen stood at the center, tall, graceful, and calm. Her presence was powerful, but comforting. Her eyes were similar to Lyria's, filled with wisdom and kindness. Lyria stepped forward first. "Mother, this is Evan," she said. "He is the person who helped me find myself again." The queen studied Evan for a moment, not with suspicion, but with curiosity. Then she smiled, a gentle and warm smile that filled the hall with peace. "Welcome, human," the queen said. "We have heard much about you. My daughter speaks highly of your character." Evan bowed slightly, unsure of the proper greeting. "Thank you for allowing me to be here," he said politely. Instead of judging him, the queen asked questions about Earth, his work, his experiences, and how he met Lyria. Evan answered honestly. And he noticed that Lyria stood beside him the whole time with pride and comfort in her expression. The queen listened closely to every word. After a while, she said something that made Lyria's heart lift. "You have given my daughter something she greatly needed companionship that is sincere and respectful. For that, you have our gratitude." Lyria looked at Evan with soft eyes, and he returned the expression. Their bond was clear for everyone to see in the following days. Evan spent more time on Lyria's homeworld, learning their customs, meeting their people, and understanding their traditions. Everywhere they went, people recognized Lyria and treated her with respect. But they also noticed how relaxed she was when Evan was around. It was the kind of change that didn't need explanations. It was visible and natural. One evening, as they walked through a quiet garden filled with glowing flowers, Lyria said, "I used to think I had to face everything alone, that my position meant I should never show weakness or ask for help. But you showed me that sharing feelings is not weakness. It is strength. Yvonne nodded. And you taught me that kindness can cross any distance, even between two completely different worlds. They stopped near a small fountain made of crystal, where water glowed softly. The moment felt peaceful and deep, like something important was about to happen. Will you continue to stay in my life? Lyria asked in a gentle voice that carried hope. Evan didn't hesitate. Always, he said simply. Those words were not dramatic. Not complicated, just honest. Their promise wasn't about grand declarations. It was about understanding, trust, and the quiet comfort they found in each other. When their time on the planet ended, the Queen personally bid farewell to Evan, saying, "You will always have a place here. My daughter has regained her light because of your presence. For that, you are welcome among us." Back on the interstellar station, their daily meetings continued, but now with a deeper connection. Other travelers saw the bond between them and felt inspired. It became common to see species sitting together who normally stayed apart. Lyria and Evan didn't intend to start a movement, but their friendship became a symbol of unity and understanding. Some people quietly said, "If a human can sit beside a lonely alien princess, maybe we can also reach out to someone who sits alone." No one needed to announce it. No one needed to explain it. It simply happened. One day, as Lyria and Evan watched the stars again, she said, "The moment you sat beside me without fear changed everything. And the moment you smiled back changed everything for me," Evan replied. They both looked ahead. Knowing their story was not ending, it was beginning. They didn't know where their journey would take them. They knew they would walk that path together. The princess who once sat alone now had someone beside her. And the human who sat without hesitation gained more than he ever expected. Their friendship became a bridge between two worlds, built not with power or rules, but with kindness, respect, and the courage to sit beside someone who needed company. And that simple act changed both their lives forever.